This is the Bears Barroom Radio Network, and the following program is brought to you by the Verdoliak Law Group, fighting insurance companies since 1963, and TickSplits.com. TickSplits.com, no service fees. The price you see is the price you pay.
Buffone. A certain magic will always linger with the very name. It speaks of courage and fervor in the world's most brutal game. 55, worn by Doug Buffone, a Chicago Bear through and through. He demanded excellence of himself and anyone wearing navy blue.
You tell me what's going on. This is moronic. We're going to get our whipped all the way down the line. I want somebody to get kicked in the and get out there and play. You're getting paid to play this game. And play it right. I don't mind you getting beat. I got my whipped many times. But I tell you, I took somebody down with me. You are a professional team. Act like one, for God's sakes.
Football fans, this is Buffone 55. The John Buffone Show.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Buffone 55, without a doubt the fastest-paced Chicago Bears football podcast available. Thank you to all listening live on mixlr.com. If you're not in the chat room, stop on by and interact with the Barflies who are congregating there for Bears Talk. And if you're catching the podcast version, why not leave us a review anywhere and everywhere, especially if you're listening on iTunes? Well, Barflies, it's not often I get to do a show about the Chicago Bears after they clinched a division title, and by that I mean it's the first time ever. There they are, the fireworks. Oh man, Barflies, the last time the Bears clinched the North, I was barely old enough to drink, so I don't know if I'd be allowed in the bar room at this point. Listen, I love this team. I love this fan base. We've been complaining about subpar play on the field for nearly a decade. Man, it's just nice to win. When I feel like that scene from The Office when Kevin Malone gets his parking space back and he looks teary-eyed into the camera and he says, "It's just nice to win one." But there's still work to do. Let's not pop any bottles yet. Speaking of which, Aldo, I don't know how many celebratory drinks you've had since the win. Just assure me that you're sober enough to do the show tonight.
I think I am sober enough. And boy, oh boy, that was a really special Sunday. And to do it against the Packers and to finally get back in the playoffs. I was at the game and I was thinking about you, my friend. I was saying, man, I wish John was here with me. And but maybe next time, maybe a Super Bowl game. Who knows?
Oh man, let's not. Don't tease me. My heart can only take so much. But before we bring in our guest tonight, the host and producer of the Better Rivals podcast, Oscar Aparicio, you and I have some work to do beforehand. Aldo, tell our audience what it is.
Well, every week we start and end Buffone 55 with what we call the 555 segment. I ask John 5 questions, and he has 55 seconds to respond to each question. The 55 seconds are John's tribute to his uncle, Doug Buffone, who wore number 55 during his 15 seasons with the Chicago Bears. John, let's get started with question number 1. Now, if you could become a verbal barometer for us and share your emotions during that Packer game, I'd like to know where you were at emotionally at the start of the game, how high you were after the Bears took a 14-3 lead over the Packers on Tariq Cohen's 12-yard catch and run, how low you got when Packer running back Jamal Williams scored on a 10-yard run to tie the game at 14 with 4 minutes to go in the third quarter, and of course, how high you got when the Bears won the game and the title. You've got 55 seconds.
Although I think I said this last week, I am genetically programmed to assume everything is going to fall apart when it comes to the Bears. I'm working on that. I'm getting better. So at the start of the game, I was how I always am. Amped up, coming off a good workout, ready to run through a wall. Then I took a nice relaxing breath when they went up 14-3. When the Packers tied it, I threw my hat. I literally yelled, "Here we, expletive, go again." I nearly put a hole in my couch when they tried that wildcat play on 3rd and 1 and fumbled it away. But when it was all said and done and the Bears won the division, there is a picture of me inches away from from my television where I spent most of the fourth quarter, my hands on my head, and for a couple of seconds, I could not believe what I was seeing. Although I listened to this show, Buffone 55, from this time a year ago. The Bears were 4-9. They were going to play the Lions. We had to fill time talking about whether or not Matt Stafford could be a Hall of Famer. Now we're talking about Super Bowl chances. Can you freaking believe this? My goodness, 2018 is not 2017. Thank God. Now the Bears will be playing in early 2019. What a time to be alive, man.
Unbelievable. Man, did you rehearse that? You guys nailed it right at the 55 seconds. You're a pro.
We're doing this a long time, Aldo. I know what I'm doing.
Clearly. Now, the curse, that is the Green Bay Packers, was lifted Sunday. Who were the 3 stars of the game who helped lift that curse, and why? You have 55 seconds.
All right, I'm going to give an honorable mention to Leonard Floyd. That guy was all over the place. He played potentially his best game of the season, 6 tackles and 2 for loss. But then my 3 stars, Roquan Smith, another 10-tackle game. Smith showed off his speed and sideline-to-sideline ability all day. Remember when this guy was a holdout? That seems like it was 5 years ago, but it was actually just earlier this season. Number 2 star, Mitchell Trubisky, had a really bad game against LA, comes back, goes 20-28, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, leads the offense to score enough points in crucial situations to beat the Packers. That's what you want your franchise quarterback to do. Then number 1, Khalil Mack. Honestly, are we going to keep hearing about how the Bears gave up too much for this guy, or is that finally done? 2.5 sacks, and he was tossing offensive linemen around like rag dolls. Khalil Mack has been the crown jewel in this prize defense, and he is going to be terrorizing Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Matt Stafford, and the rest of the NFL for the rest of their careers.
Including, what's his name, the 49ers quarterback? Oh, Oscar will tell us who that guy is.
We'll figure that guy out later.
All right. John, during and after every game, the holding being committed on Bears defenders, I should say, not after every game, but during every game, the holding being committed on Bears defenders borders on being a criminal activity. Adam Hogue found this Pro Football Focus fact that perfectly illustrates this felony. Khalil Mack has only drawn 1 holding penalty all season. It came against O.J. Howard way back in Week 4. How in the heck is this allowed to happen? And is Khalil Mack to blame in some way for not complaining more often to the officials? Your thoughts, and you have 55 seconds.
You know, I talked about this with Draft Dr. Phil a couple weeks ago. I call this the LeBron James effect. You know, when LeBron goes to the basket and he'll get absolutely mauled and they won't call a foul, although he will complain a little bit more than Mac does. But my point is, I'm not saying that this is right by any means, but when you are more physically imposing and clearly the dominant force, you are sometimes less likely to get foul calls, and in this case, holding calls. It's also like when Cam Newton will get absolutely blown up sometimes and won't get a roughing the passer call. Well, he's 6'5", 260 and bigger than some of the linebackers chasing him down. And well, Cam is known for running, so he's not going to get the same type of protection. Once again, I'm not saying this is right by any means, but we've seen this in other instances. I don't think any amount of complaining is going to help, because if teams don't hold, Mac might get 6 sacks in a game instead of 2.5. He might be breaking single game records all over the place. But maybe if more of a spotlight's put on it, he'll get a few, but I don't think we should count on that.
Yeah, I agree. I one of these days I'm going to provide a rant of my own about the NFL officiating. I just, oh my gosh, it just drives me up the wall.
It's different every week.
Yep, another show. Anyway, question number 4. John, in Week 1, this Bears team was a dropped interception away from beating the Packers at Lambeau Field. Now, in Week 14, Eddie Jackson makes that interception in the end zone to stop the Packers from any type of incredible comeback. Are the Bears finally rid of this curse that has the Packers, and are they ready to reverse that 3-17 record that the Bears have against the Packers since back to 2009? Is this really happening? You've got 55 seconds.
Listen, one game does not a curse break. The last Sunday's win was a big step, and maybe Green Bay is entering a mini rebuild with a new coach coming to town and a roster that I guess you could say isn't exactly stellar. But there are plenty of things to work out before we say this curse is over. Let us not forget that on that game-ending interception, Eddie Jackson got hurt. That's like a witch's curse that whatever you put in comes back threefold, or whatever that saying is. So let's pump the brakes a little bit. Also, let's wait until the Bears can take care of business in Lambeau. I know we'll have to wait a while for that, but Sunday was simply a launching pad of sorts. I think the Bears are ascending, and it's possible that the Packers are in a weird football purgatory type stage where you have no idea whether they're good or not, and the only thing that keeps them in the conversation for the most part is their quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. For me, this curse we're talking about isn't dead, but it could be running its course and coming to an end very soon.
Oh, sooner the better.
I agree.
Sooner the better. All right, my last question has to do with the guy you just mentioned. What do you make of Aaron Rodgers? The criticism raining down on him, is like it's like being hit. What do I want to say here? The criticism raining down on him must have him hitting the bottle like I did when the Bears hired John Fox. That's what I want to say. Now, is he a player? Or as one analyst said, is he the kind of guy who just wants to play for himself and is not a real team player? Is he, simply a superstar, a future Hall of Famer who the organization just has not done a good job of surrounding him with the teammates needed for a Super Bowl? What's your take on Aaron Rodgers? 55 seconds, and then we'll bring in Oscar.
Well, obviously he is a superstar, but he's a certain type of superstar. Green Bay has had this kind of superstar before. Remember Brett Favre? I'm sure you do. He was a guy that had a fun personality, immense talent, but as the career went on, it kind of seemed like he was more ego-driven than team-driven, wanting to be coaxed out of retirement every year. He has every individual record in the book, but even with all that, you get one Super Bowl in a couple decades. We see this with guys all the time. And if you're going to say the Packers need to get people to supplement Rodgers, well, it might be pretty difficult to do that while Rodgers is there. His cap hit for the next 4 years is as followed: 26, 32, 33, $37 million. Just to put that into comparison, Tom Brady this year and next year is 22 and 27. And in 2016 and 2017, 13 and 14 million. I know the cap is going up, but Rodgers signed a 4-year, $134 million contract. I get that it's legacy time for Rodgers, but Trubisky's only going to be making $7 and $9 million the next 2 years. Blame the Packers, blame the coaches, but if you're going to be in the conversation for all-time greatest quarterback, you need better results. That being said, I'd like to go ahead and bring on our guest for the night. He is the podcast producer and host of the Better Rival podcast, which covers the Bears' upcoming opponent, the San Francisco 49ers, also writes for Niners Nation. His name is Oscar Aparicio. Welcome to Buffone 55. Oscar, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are y'all doing?
Oh, real good, real good. We're excited to break down this matchup. There is some things on the line for the Bears, so I kind of want to just jump right into it. You know, back-to-back wins for the Niners. Nick Mullins has thrown for over 1,700 yards with 10 touchdowns, 6 interceptions over the last 6 games, and he started to look like he's really coming into the starting role in spurts. What I want to know is, this guy was an undrafted free agent out of Southern Miss who was considered too small in size, not really a strong arm, not really NFL-worthy, but he's proven a lot of people wrong. I want to know what your thoughts are on Nick Mullins.
So I think Mullins is doing some things that not a lot of quarterbacks can do in the NFL, which is he is taking advantage of what the scheme is giving him. And Kyle Shanahan's scheme is phenomenal. It schemes players wide the hell open every single week. I mean, when you look at some of the plays that he hit last week against the Seattle Seahawks, which doesn't have a bad defense. They're not as good as they were when they were in the Legion of Boom days, but they're not a terrible defense. You had George Kittle running wide open. You had Garrett Selleck, our second tight end, running wide open. And you got players not within 5 yards of them. And not every quarterback can hit them and hit them in stride and allow them to get yards after the catch. And that's exactly what Nick Mullins is doing. So he's taking what defenses are giving him. But the reason that he's continuing to play over C.J. Beathard right now is because of his ability to process pre-snap and his ability to beat the blitz. He's doing a very, very good job in making sure that he puts the ball in the right spots and doesn't make too many mistakes, which wasn't always something that C.J. Beathard was able to do. Especially against Seattle, he did this very, very well. He was 4 of 6 when he was blitzed for 56 yards, but all 4 of them were first downs. So I think overall he is growing into I would say probably an average starter at this point, and he's definitely going to get tested with the Bears defense because it's going to be the most formidable defense he's faced all year.
Sticking with that quarterback position, obviously Jimmy Garoppolo's injury hurt this team immensely. If Jimmy G's in there all year, and given the rest of the personnel, and I know they go and they lose Jerick McKinnon, and there's some other things going on, but if Jimmy Garoppolo's in there all year, is this a playoff team in your mind?
No, I don't think it's a playoff team, but I do think it's a team that is probably not all the way out of it right now. The team, I think, if everything broke their way, probably would have been around a 7-win team, maybe an 8 if everything broke their way. And I think that they were in a couple of games this year, even with their backup quarterback. I mean, the Green Bay game, chief among them. You know that team very, very well. Mm-hmm. The Niners hit them with everything that they had for about 3 quarters, and then Aaron Rodgers did very Aaron Rodgers things, and all of a sudden that ends up being a last-second loss. So I think the team probably ends up around that, 7-win area. And if they can sneak another win this year, that puts them at 5 wins. And I do think that 2-win difference is enough that Jimmy Garoppolo probably would have been able to make that up. So I think that it's probably not a playoff team per se, because they were only going to go as far as their defense was going to take them, and their defense is not that great.
Well, at least it gives some hope going into next year with hopefully a fully healthy Jimmy G and another year under the belts and some more experience. Maybe the Niners are more formidable next year. I want to talk about the head coach, Kyle Shanahan, because this is a guy that, we around the NFL, you always hear about quarterback whisperers, whether it's John Gruden. He's going to turn whoever he touches into gold, and some of these other guys who are supposed to be quarterback gurus. But it really seems like where Kyle Shanahan goes, the quarterbacks play really, really well. And when he leaves, they don't. See Atlanta for the most part. So what is your assessment on Kyle Shanahan and his effect on a quarterback and an offense in general?
So I think Kyle Shanahan's effect on an offense, he is remarkably amazing at getting the most out of his players. And, of course, everything starts with the quarterback. Pro Football Focus does basically coach rankings, where they assess the success of a coach and try to disaggregate the effect of a coach on the team. And basically, Kyle Shanahan is usually at or near the top because he's able to make the offense for the teams that he coaches seem and feel a lot better than some of the grades of those players actually are. And he does it because of his ability to call plays. He really attacks the middle of the field a lot, gives you a lot of high-low options for the quarterback, and usually those areas of the field are going to be manned by just not as good coverage defenders, right? Usually you put your great coverage defenders out on the boundary, and so you've got safeties and linebackers in the middle of the field, and they're usually a bit more susceptible to the pass, especially if you've got a very, very good quarterback. And even if you don't, right, you want to go towards the softer area of the field. And so that's what he's able to do. He's able to focus on that area, and he's able to throw concepts at teams that look and feel the same at the initial stem, but then break and act very, very differently when the actual routes are declared and the concepts reveal themselves, which makes it very, very difficult for pattern match teams like Vic Fangio's defenses to keep up. So I think he does a lot of really good things with pre-snap motion, with personnel. He likes to pass out of run formations and run out of pass formations. His playbook is dense, and he's able to coach it well that an undrafted free agent can actually succeed. So, I personally think he's one of the great kind of tacticians and coaches in the NFL. And once he gets talent and actual pieces to make his offense go, like he did in Atlanta, he's going to be amazing.
I want to stick with the offense a little bit. Matt Breida, who has almost 800 rushing yards, had to step into a pretty prominent role in this offense after, Jerick McKinnon goes down very early in the season. Can you talk about his performance? Because he's a little banged up now. He may not even play. Can you assess basically the running backs in general and how they perform this season?
I've got this joke that I'm really happy that the 49ers spent such high draft capital on their running back, because the only way that you can get quality running back play in today's NFL is to draft them in the first round. You've got Saquon Barkley, you've got you've got Ezekiel Elliott, and then you've got Matt Breida. And Matt Breida is an undrafted free agent at Georgia Southern. And the reason that I really, really liked him, even coming out for the draft, was because he was a ridiculous athlete. He was the most athletic running back in his class. And that athleticism translates to the NFL. He is a good interior runner, but he's probably best on outside zone plays, which are the bread and butter of Kyle Shanahan's offense. Now, the reason he's taken such a leap from year 1 to year 2, because he performed fairly well in year 1, but he was playing second fiddle to Carlos Hyde. The reason that he's really taken off in year 2 is because of his ability to affect the passing game. He is ridiculously fast and quick, and he can make people move, and he's able to explode through holes in open space. And when you put the ball in his hands, whether it's on outside zones or whether it's on screen plays, he's going to succeed. And it's because of his remarkable athleticism and vision, and he's got a little patience too. So he's really developed into a great complement for the 49ers. And he was able to shoulder the load. I mean, the guy has over, I think at this point, his per carry average has dipped finally below 6 yards a carry over the course of a year. He's had such a remarkable season, and you're right, he is banged up, and so he's splitting carries with Jeff Wilson, but he's been a revelation at the running back position, and I think he was Philip Lindsay before Philip Lindsay was Philip Lindsay, if you just give him some time.
He was Philip Lindsay before it was cool to be Philip Lindsay. So.
He's the hipster Philip Lindsay is what I'm trying to say. Put some glasses on him and a mustache and give him a unicycle, and he's right there.
And he'll grind his own coffee beans right in the end zone. So I want to keep up with this offense. One of the positions I'm sure that you guys talk a lot about on San Francisco is the state of the wide receivers. Now, can you tell us a little bit about how the current receiving core and if you expect the Niners to address that pretty heavily in the offseason?
I don't expect them to address it heavily in the offseason because I think their wide receiving core is not as bad or dire as a lot of people think. Dante Pettis has come on as of late, and he has been exactly what the Niners hoped he would be when they drafted him in the second round out of Washington. Now, this is a player who is exactly what Shanahan wants. He is a savvy route runner, and he is the king of separation. Every single week, there is a clip from a game where he just abuses a defensive back off of the line, and he's able to get off clean. He was able to force a defensive holding penalty and a pass interference penalty against Seattle that ended up extending a drive that ended up being effectively the game-winning drive in overtime. And it's because he is incredibly good at at the initial get off the line and then separating at the top of the route. That's exactly the kind of wide receiver that Kyle Shanahan wants. And what that's done is it's relegated Marquise Goodwin to the Z receiver, which was Pierre Garçon's former spot. I don't know that Pierre Garçon's going to be here next year, but the Z receiver is the move receiver oftentimes in Shanahan's offense. And that's exactly what Marquise Goodwin is really, really good at. He's good at threatening with his speed, and if you do move him around and don't allow teams to get a jam on him, he can be incredibly effective. I think Pettis has the speed to take the top off, even if he's not asked to all the time. Marquise Goodwin is still going to be Marquise Goodwin. And then you've got your slot receiver, and that's going to be Trent Taylor, who is coming off of injury. And I think that complementary group of receivers is the kind of group that Shanahan wants. He doesn't need a Julio Jones. It's probably because it's really difficult to find Julio Jones. Those guys don't grow on trees. So I think they might try and add a player or two in that regard, but they don't feel the need to go after and sign a big name number one receiver because I think they're pretty happy with the group they have.
Another guy I'm sure they're very happy with is tight end George Kittle. Another one of these guys that kind of, splashed onto the scene this year. Most targets on the team, could be over 1,000 yards receiving. I mean, what is this guy doing that's so good and he's able to put up these stats when, people had probably still couldn't pick him out of a lineup if you offered him to?
Oh, man. So George Kittle, I said it at the beginning of the year. George Kittle's going to win you your fantasy league. I advised everyone to pick him up, especially if you can get him in the fifth round, and boy, did it pay off because he's amazing. So what makes him so successful? One, he is, I think, again, another super athletic player. He was the number one athlete in his class based on P-Spark. And of course, he was drafted in the same classes like O.J. Howard and David Njoku. So it was a freaky athletic class for tight ends in general, and George Kittle was chief among them. He had a 4.5 440, which is good, not great, but he had an explosive broad jump, and so he's able to get in and out of his breaks and accelerate really, really quickly and get to top speed, which is why he's getting ridiculous yards after the catch numbers. His yards after the catch this year in 2018 are second amongst all players. Christian McCaffrey is 1 with 754 yards. George Kittle is 2. Saquon Barkley is 3. Jason White is 4. Todd Gurley is 5. One of those things is not like the other, and that's George Kittle at tight end. Right? When you compare George Kittle, not just to tight ends, but you say, okay, let's have him look at receivers. Well, just in terms of receivers, he is head and shoulders above everyone else. He's first overall in yards after the catch. And it's because of two things. One, Shanahan schemes him open, but then when he does catch the ball, he outruns everyone. I mean, it's once every couple of weeks that he has an 85-yard touchdown run or a 70-yard touchdown run, and he just toasts everyone. And that kind of speed and athleticism is fantastic at the tight end position. And he never has to come up the field because he's a fantastic blocker in the run game as well. You see clips of him just taking people off the frame on the L22 and just disrespectfully blocking them as though they have no families. So overall, I think he is an absolute superstar. He's in an offense that is going to take advantage of his skills. And I think that's the player the Bears have to watch out for, because if he runs roughshod, it's going to be a long day for the Bears defense.
Now, you talked about George Kittle's blocking. Let's stick with that theme. Last year, you appeared on one of our Bears Barroom Radio Network shows and told us that the 49ers had an awful offensive line. And if you look at some of the stats this year, they're even worse than 2017. So I got to ask you, does this mean that the 49ers offensive line is even worse in 2018 than it was in 2017?
It is actually considerably better.
Okay.
So you've got Joe Staley, who's still doing Joe Staley things, and he's amazing here on the left-hand side. But then you've got Mike McGlinchey. He was the first-round pick for the 49ers because, of course, they knew they had to beef up and get better along the offensive line. And Mike McGlinchey has been the best rookie tackle in football, and his Pro Football Focus grade of 76.4 puts him third on the team and top 10 overall in the NFL. So at this point, you're looking at a top 10 left tackle, a top 10 right tackle, and then your guards have actually performed a little bit better. The one player that actually stabilized this team was Mike Person. He's a journeyman guard, and he's actually performed really, really well for the 49ers. Laken Tomlinson's still on the left. Weston Richburg was another addition they had in the offseason, and that's the player who's been a little disappointing. Now, they still have some problems with, if you're looking at overall sack numbers, they're not going to be as amazing as you would hope. But I think when you look at what they've been able to do in the run game, that's in large part because of their ability to perform as an offensive line unit. And when you look at their game against Denver, you had Von Miller and Nick Chubb, two of the best pass rushing kind of people in the NFL, and probably one of the best duos in the NFL. And they couldn't do a whole hell of a lot to stop the 49ers offense, or at least destroy them as you would think they could do if the 49ers offensive line were in shambles. Now, Khalil Mack is a whole different beast, right? That guy is going to be able to blow through everyone and anyone, and has all year. But the offensive line for the 49ers is much better this year, and it's in much better shape than it was at this time last year.
Good news for Niners fans, and taking strides on the offensive line. We are talking to the host and producer of the Better Rivals podcast, Oscar Aparicio. Oscar, I want to switch sides of the ball. I want to go over to defense. DeForest Buckner leads the Niners with 11 sacks, 2 against Russell Wilson last week. Tell us a little bit about Buckner. How does he line up, and how do they use him in this 3-4 scheme? Because that kind of gives you some flexibility when it comes to defensive playmakers.
Yeah, so the 49ers are now basically running a 4-3 defense. They run that Seattle scheme, cover 3, and so they're going to have a 4-man front, and Buckner is that 3 technique. So he's going to line up over your guard, and depending on whether you're in an over or under front, it just kind of depends on where he ends up. Now, he is the player that they try to funnel all of their pass rush lanes into, and what Chris Kiffin, who's the pass rushing specialist coach, has tried to do is basically have them rush as an entire unit, as opposed to just one guy running off of the edge. And it's worked to great effect. I mean, you look at last year, and DeForest Buckner had like 3 sacks. This year, he's already in double-digit sacks, and he's got 2 games to go. He's always been this good, but now I think the team is a little bit better at rushing as a unit. And so he is going to be the person who is going to be disruptive along the interior. And if he gets interior pressure, and he's capable of doing it, he's got this really, really good kind of slap chop rip move that he really, really likes to do, then he's immediately in a quarterback's face, and he's going to do it very, 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 very quickly. So he is the 49ers' best player on defense, and he's going to be the person they move around. They also sometimes like to move him out to the edge and overload one side or the other, and the Niners love to do a lot of stunts as well, which they did against the Bears last year too, when they faced them about the same time last year. So I expect a lot of movement from Buckner. I expect him to line up at 3 technique most of the time, and expect him to generally hold it very well and be disruptive in the middle.
Another guy that's having a hell of a season on the defensive side of the ball, rookie Fred Warner, 105 tackles this year. He was acquired as part of the Mitchell Trubisky trade. This kid's looked impressive. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
So Fred Warner is a guy who I think the quote on him is that he is a high-effort guy in an elite athlete's body. So he plays the game as though he has to make up for physical deficiencies, but he really doesn't, because he is another very, very good athlete. And he played the overhang defender in college, which was kind of this coverage area that splits the slot and the end of the line. And so he's been fairly good in coverage, which is great, what you want from your linebackers in the middle of the field. But he's really kind of reduced the sting of the loss of Reuben Foster, because he's played, not spectacularly, not to the highs of Reuben Foster when he was playing at the borderline elite level that he played at last year. But he has really solidified the middle of that 49ers defense. And he plays assignment sound football. He has the green dot. He makes the calls in the huddle. And he's a rookie, and he's had that responsibility from year one. So he is a sideline player. He's not necessarily in the mold of Roquan, but he can definitely hold his own. And if he continues to develop, I think can develop into a very, very good inside linebacker for the 49ers.
Sticking with the theme of the Mitchell Trubisky trade, the Niners took Solomon Thomas in that draft. In all honesty, what has been the story with Solomon Thomas? 6 quarterback hits this year, only 1 sack. Safe to say, underperforming, not meeting expectations in San Francisco?
I think that's definitely safe to say. He has been underwhelming. I think there's a lot of people who are ready to write Solomon Thomas off, but I think you have to contextualize where Solomon Thomas played in college and where he's been playing in the pros so far. In college, he was an interior defensive lineman. He played the 3 technique, which is where Buckner's at right now. And he kicked, he played along the edge, most of the time. Then he kicked inside on passing downs. If you look at his inside to outside split at Stanford, he was primarily along the inside, and that's where he played the most. Now, in the NFL, because of his athletic profile, he was moved to the edge first because he was considered to be a little undersized at 290 pounds or whatever, which seems a little ridiculous because Aaron Donald is undersized and he's just continuing to destroy the interior of offensive lines everywhere. But the Niners and Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator, has basically resigned to play Thomas on the edge and move him inside not often. His rookie year, he played on the edge about 80% of the time. And now this year, you're finally starting to see that shift a little bit, and he's playing more along the inside later on in the year. He's had some effective games when he's played the majority of snaps along the interior. Against Seattle last week, he had a couple of pressures, and he forced a couple of key holding calls because he was able to beat the guard so quickly. And that's because he was rushing from the interior spot, and he's just a lot to handle for the kind of athlete that he is against guards. So I think that part of what's been underwhelming for him is that he's been played a little bit out of position, and that's because of the glut of players that the Niners have along the interior. And I also think you can't discount some of the off-the-field stuff. He lost his sister, who he was very, very close to, and I think that's weighed heavily on him, and it's kind of difficult when you're dealing with that family trauma and also trying to play football at an elite level. So we have no idea how to quantify that and how much that's affected him, but I do think that has weighed on him. So I think that if you look at Thomas, he has been underwhelming, but I'm in no way, shape, or form ready to write him off. He does flash on tape every now and again, and he's still a very, very good run defender. So I think next year will really be the make or break year for Thomas, but so far I think it is very safe to say he's been a little underwhelming.
Let's talk about the Niners special teams, because Bears fans always like to hear about special teams or lack thereof, and misery loves company sometimes. So what can you tell us a little bit about the Niners special teams? You really don't have to tell us about Robbie Gould, because we have a pretty good feel about that guy.
Are you sure? Because I feel like since y'all let him go, that you guys maybe have forgotten that he is one of the most accurate kickers in NFL history. And that
we are well aware. We are
continuing to just put daggers in the hearts of anyone who tries to get in his way. Despite the windy conditions at Levi Stadium, he's able to continually hit field goals. And I think last year he was, largely the reason for the Niners winning the game. So, he continues to do well in San Francisco. And Bradley Pitting, I think, is a solid punter. I wouldn't say that the 49ers special teams are anything to write home about. They did return a kick for a touchdown last week against Seattle, but that is a very, very rare thing. I think that was the first time that the Niners had returned a kick back since 2011 and Ted Ginn against, incidentally, the Seattle Seahawks. So it had been a long time, I think, for the Niners to return a kick. And so their special teams are definitely nothing to write home about, but their kicking game is solid. Their punting game is pretty good. And they've got a couple of really good gunners out on the edge. They've got some speedy guys that are able to cover kicks. So it's definitely not a strength, but it's not a weakness either.
All right, let's talk about the Niners as a whole. I mean, they're out of playoff contention. In your opinion, or in your foresight, do you see head coach Kyle Shanahan focusing on looking at the young talent and third-string talent to try to get an evaluation for next year, or is this a matter of fact? It's just business as usual. Let's try to win the game. I mean, these veterans. I mean, their job is to play football, and some of them aren't going to be on the team next year. Some of them are just trying to show off to get another contract at other places. How do you see this Niners? Last couple of games kind of unfolding?
So I think it's been very clear the last couple of games that the 49ers are 100% in evaluation mode. Kyle Shanahan was in a press conference a couple weeks ago and explicitly said just as much, where he said, look, we're gonna see over the next few weeks if these players really want to be here and how they're going to earn their spot. He's now benched a couple of veteran players that were high-priced signings that now see 0 snaps because the younger guys are getting snaps. You look at people like Earl Mitchell, who was signed, I think, like a $23 or $25 million deal. It's one of the 49ers' first free agent acquisitions under the John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan era. He's now been benched for DJ Jones. And DJ Jones is a young, promising player who is probably already better than Earl Mitchell. But DJ Jones has been playing along at nose tackle, and Earl Mitchell hasn't seen the field for maybe more than 2 or 3 snaps the last 2 weeks. You've got now Tarvarius Moore, who's playing at cornerback because you've got Ahkello Witherspoon, who's suffered from a knee injury. He sprained his PCL. And he is a third-round rookie who's converting from safety. And he has another one of those, like, kind of height, weight, speed guys in the third round that is developing into the cornerback role. So you're going to see a lot of him. You're also going to see Mark Mazocha and Elijah Lee at the linebacker spot. Elijah Lee has actually solidified the outside linebacker spot because, well, Malcolm Smith is just not good at football anymore. And so Malcolm Smith hasn't seen the field, even though he was a high-priced free agent as well. So it's definitely eval mode, but the eval mode has actually made the 49ers, especially on defense, better. Because Elijah Lee is better than Malcolm Smith. DJ Jones is better than Earl Mitchell. And I think that Tarvarius Moore, at least right now, may be on par with Ahkello Witherspoon, who's had a very up-and-down season so far. So I think overall it is eval mode time, but the eval mode might actually be a good thing for the Niners, and they're, especially on defense, performing a little better than they did early this year.
All right, one of the last things I got to ask you, and I would be remiss if I did not bring up talking to a Niners person about the trade in the draft a couple years ago. Last year, you appeared with my producer Aldo on his show Bears on Tap, and you said that John Lynch committed highway robbery of Ryan Pace. This is how you put it, Aldo. I think you got that sound, don't you?
I do. Here it is.
John Lynch basically was on the phone with a ski mask over his face and like a voice modulator, and he was like, "Give me all your picks." And Ryan Pace was like, "Okay."
So Oscar, I gotta ask you: is it still highway robbery? And what is your evaluation of Lynch since then? And kind of your evaluation of Ryan Pace since then? And after we got a little bit of time with this.
It is still absolutely highway robbery because you judge the actual net of picks. You don't judge the actual effect. John Lynch as a trader is probably better, at least at the top of the draft, than maybe he is at drafting actual talent. But that doesn't mean he didn't fleece Ryan Pace. That's still absolutely true. And if you think of like even the outcome of what you're looking at, it's not like Mitchell Trubisky has lit the world on fire at the quarterback position this year. You can't tell me that whenever he drops back to pass, you're not just like cringing a little bit because you're not sure if he's actually going to do something with his legs, throw a really, really ugly interception, or complete a really, really beautiful ball. Like, those are the 3 Mitchell Trubisky's you're going to get, and you're never sure which one, right? You look at his Pro Football Focus grade over the course of the year, and he's ranked 48th out of all of the quarterbacks who have attempted passes this year. Mullins actually has a better quarterback grade from Pro Football Focus than Mitch Trubisky does. So I think if you're looking at like outcomes, it's still probably a little dubious, right? Like our number 3 overall pick is a little disappointing, but let's not pretend that Mitchell Trubisky is like lighting the world on fire. I think Nagy's done a phenomenal job with that offense, and Vic Fangio is Lord Fangio, and he's amazing at defense as well. So absolutely still fleeced him. Whether or not you made the right decision or whether or not we made the right decision at 3, still to be decided. Whether or not you made the decision at 2, still to be decided as well. But I still think that Lynch comes out on top.
Well, I mean, we're talking about the Bears here, who needed stability at quarterback, who still have records with Sid Luckman, and who have had a carousel of quarterbacks. At one point, I think I rattled off about 20 that have started for him. But I think that the Bears have been pretty happy with what Trubisky's brought to the table, and some of the stats some of the focus and the analytics may say him otherwise, but they're winning games with this guy, and they feel pretty sound about his performance. And it's his first year in a Matt Nagy offense. I said last week that the offense that Mitchell Trubisky came into in his rookie year had the complexity of a C&C. So it was all a matter of maybe punting on that rookie season. Now he's getting a little more comfortable in a more complex offense. But like you said, you let things kind of play out, and time is tell, because we're still only 2 years removed from this, and there's a lot of time left to see how people progress and get better, or degress and get worse. But Aldo, before we get Oscar out of here, is there anything going on in the chat room that people would like to ask him?
You can bet there's a lot of activity in the chat room after Oscar's last response to that question. Some people are wondering, did you hit a bong before coming on and doing the show and stuff?
That's legal out in California, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's totally okay. But I've got one question of my own, and then I've got a couple from the chat room. My question is, Shanahan was asked about Khalil Mack, and it appears like John Lynch made a really strong play to try to sign and trade and sign Khalil Mack, and the Raiders just weren't having it. According to Shanahan, he feels like their offer was probably as good as the Bears. What's your take on that whole thing, and how much does that hurt you as a 49ers fan?
Well, I do think the Raiders have the little sibling syndrome, where they are definitely the kind of lesser regarded of the two franchises in the Bay Area whenever they choose to be in the Bay Area, because sometimes they're in LA and eventually they'll be in Vegas, right? And I do think that Mark Davis had a little bit of a, kind of thumb your nose at the other team. And I don't know that there was anything that John Lynch could have put on the table that would have made the Raiders trade Khalil Mack to the 49ers. I think that the deal was competitive, if not better than what the Bears offered. But at the time, I think that Jimmy Garoppolo was still healthy. You had the buzz around the 49ers in the preseason thinking they may make a playoff push in, 8-9 games. And so I think when you were looking at the Bears versus the Niners and what's that first round pick going to be, they probably chose the Bears thinking that it was going to be a worse pick, not knowing that Fangio was, like petting his pet cat. I'm imagining him like Inspector Gadget or whomever that villain was at the end there, just waiting for this talent to drop into his lap. So I do think that it was one of those things where the Raiders probably weren't going to do it for the Niners, but it is what it is. That's life, and we'll see what edge rushers are available in the draft.
Heart 4803 wants to know, how did Pace get fleeced when all he did was really give up a third and fifth rounder to get someone he believes is their franchise quarterback, a quarterback who is 23 years old, who has a tremendous upside, is very athletic, has a great college tape of being very accurate. How can you say that Ryan Pace got fleeced when he got his quarterback and the return on investment for the 49ers hasn't paid off? Reuben Foster is no longer on the team. Solomon Thomas is headed towards Busville more than Superstarville. So can you elucidate on that a little?
So you've got two things that you're looking at, right? One is you have to understand that Pace got bluffed out of his mind, right? This is someone who basically has no cards and ends up getting you to fold when you've got pocket aces. Because if he would have understood what the Niners' plan was, which everyone in the universe knew, they were looking at Kirk Cousins and that was the guy they were going to go after. They knew they weren't going to draft a quarterback. So why were you going to give up any picks to move up when you could stand pat and still get Mitchell Trubisky? That's the key thing here. But then second of all, I would say that, if Mitchell Trubisky works out, then a third and a fifth, not that big of a deal. But the problem is currently Mitchell Trubisky isn't really working out all that much. You have to hit on that pick in order to make it all go away. This is why Jared Goff has been, you're like, okay, you gave up a lot for Jared Goff, but it's kind of on the edge as to whether or not that was worth it. Same thing with Deshaun Watson. You can't tell me that Mitchell Trubisky is playing at that level because he just isn't. He hasn't been bad, and I still think that he can be good. He can be accurate, but so far this year, he still has too many games where he has boneheaded interceptions, and he's just making plays where you're like, oh, I'm not sure about that. When you look at his pass-by-pass grade, it's not great. This doesn't mean that he won't be great forever. And if you look back in 2 or 3 years, and maybe Solomon Thomas never does pan out, and Reuben Foster is, hitting women in Washington instead of San Francisco, then all of a sudden, maybe it comes out to be even. But at the end of the day, Pace still got bluffed, and they have to make up room for this to get back on even footing.
The problem with that argument, according to a lot of the barflies in the chat room, is that it's as if you knew exactly what was going to happen with that second overall pick. Apparently, there are reports here in Chicago that Ryan Pace knew that other teams were interested in moving up to 2 and either taking Trubisky or possibly taking the quarterback that he had in mind, which is why he felt like wagering a third rounder and a fifth rounder was solid advice. You're pretending as if you knew that wasn't the case, that nobody was going to move up when you don't know that. That's the fallacy in your argument.
Sure, but when you look at what's happening, you look at the other quarterbacks in that area, right? Because we're talking about him moving up to get Mitchell Trubisky when he could have had Patrick Mahomes at 10, when he could have had Deshaun Watson, who was drafted at 12. What he did was he instead of looking at a pool of players and saying, well, Trubisky, Mahomes, and Watson are all in a pool, I'm happy with any one of them. He said, nope, this is my guy. And right now, Mitchell Trubisky is not as good as Patrick Mahomes by a long shot. And he's not as good as Deshaun Watson. And so he traded 2 picks to get, at best, the 3rd best quarterback out of that draft. And that's not even taking the undrafted quarterback who, to date, has outplayed Mitchell Trubisky at times. So he could have had an undrafted guy, right? The issue is that he paid to go up to get someone that hasn't panned out, and he paid something he didn't really necessarily have to pay. So it's definitely not like, oh, yeah, he's fine and Mitchell Trubisky's great. You're looking at someone who paid something that he didn't have to pay to get a quarterback that maybe was not even the best of the 3 quarterbacks that were drafted just after him, when he could have just stood pat, drafted either Mahomes or drafted Watson and been better or fine. Because could you imagine either one of those quarterbacks in a Nagy offense? This is not we're winning the division and we're in the playoffs team. This is immediately one of the elite teams in the NFC and maybe even the NFL. So, it's one of those things where, yeah, it does not look as good today as it did then. But let's not pretend that it wasn't a good deal for the Niners.
Well, I don't think anybody is pretending. I think people are challenging your thinking on this, particularly when Trubisky has 23 touchdowns, just 12 interceptions. He's got a quarterback rating of 94.1. You're painting him out to be a bust as a quarterback when in reality,
no.
I'm
not painting him out to be a bust. I'm painting him out to be someone who is not as good of a quarterback as someone who would have been drafted 2nd overall. I think that he has, and I actually liked him coming out of college because of his accuracy. But when you look at a quarterback rating of 93, that's no longer fantastic in today's NFL. You've got quarterbacks that are routinely over 100 game after game because this is a passing league. This is a different NFL now than it was 5, 7, or 8 years ago. And Mitchell Trubisky is not a terrible quarterback. I'm not saying that he's bad or that he's a bust. Not at all. And I think Chicago has the bones of a structure that is great for quarterbacks. You've got an offensive play caller with an offense that's not going to change. You've got an innovative offensive play caller who understands his limitations and understands how to use players in space. Tariq Cohen, I think, has been fantastic. And you've got a defensive coordinator who is, because of his time in San Francisco, I know very well, is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. But when you look at Mitchell Trubisky and you look at him objectively, throw by throw, he's not been fantastic. He's been average. He's been good. He's not terrible. Sometimes he loses you games. Every now and again, he'll win a game. He had that 350-yard game with 3 touchdowns sometime in week 8 or whatever. That was holy hell, that's a fantastic game. But then he's got other games where he throws 3 picks and you're like, what the hell happened? It's that kind of inconsistency that makes him about average. And he could get better. He could be amazing. Who knows, right? You've got Drew Brees to look at, who ended up being amazing. Hall of Fame quarterback. First 3 or 4 years in San Diego wasn't that hot. That could be Mitchell Trubisky's trajectory, but we have no idea. Right now, today, Mitchell Trubisky is not a great quarterback. He's an average quarterback. He could get better, yes, but today he's average.
He threw 3 interceptions in one game that the Chicago Bears won, and this is all about projecting. And so when you look at a quarterback who is really a rookie quarterback, because last season he was under Dow Loggins and John Fox, 2 guys who just did not know how to run a modern-day offense. And you look at the fact that he is running a very complicated Matt Nagy offense, and he's getting positive results almost every game. Clearly, he's had 2 or 3 really bad games. But nonetheless, when you look at the body of work and you look at the statistics and you look at his athleticism and you look at what he has done over this past year, I don't think you can definitely say that that anyone got fleeced in this deal. I think, if anything, you should say that the jury is still out All right, I'll turn it back over to John. Thank you.
Yeah, guys, it's getting a little late on the West Coast if we can get, or the East Coast if we can we can get this going. I mean, we're talking about something that happened years ago, and all I know is the Bears are going to the playoffs. The Bears have a winning record, and the Bears have a pretty damn good quarterback right now. So before we let you go, Oscar, what I want out of you is how people can read your stuff, how they can contact with you, how they can interact with you on social media. And before you get out of here, can we get a prediction on Sunday's game?
Absolutely. So you can always get at me on Twitter. That's at Better Rivals, BETTER Rivals. And if you want to continue the discussion about Trubisky, feel free to send me a message. I'd love to keep chatting about it. Other than that, I think on Niners Nation, you can always catch the stuff I'm writing. I don't write as often as I post podcasts, but by any means, Twitter is the best place to get at me if you have a question. Or if ultimately the Bears win and you want to talk some crap, then by all means. It's the power of the victor, I guess, because I just did it to a bunch of Seahawks fans as well.
And final score for the Sunday's game.
So the line is about Bears by 4, which I think is a little tight. And I think that has to do probably with the Bears offense and maybe people not trusting that offense. I think the Bears win this game. And I do think that I don't think that they win just by 3 or 4 points. I think they probably win by a full touchdown. So if I had to guess going up against that defense, I think the Niners maybe crack 17 points. And I think the Bears probably end up somewhere near 20 or 23. So I think if they win by more than 4, it's probably 23 to 17, somewhere in that area. But it's going to be interesting to see if Mullins is going to be tested or how he's going to be tested specifically by this Bears defense. Because big Fangio, man, he's the one that got away. He's like that hot girlfriend in college that you had and they end up being like a model. And you're like, oh, man, I dated her once. And now you're no longer. And then she gets married to like Tom Brady or something. And you're like, of course she does. Of course she does.
He's the host and producer of the Better Rivals podcast, Oscar Aparicio. Oscar, thank you so much for chatting with us on B55. I think you just got yourself a lot of followers from Chicago. We'll talk to you down the road.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
You too. All right. Oh, no, it's time.
It is time, and I forgot to cue up my music. Oh, darn it. So enthralled in that. Here it is. Hold on. Oh, there it is. It is that time.
I am ready.
All right, let's get to it. The second portion of our 555 questions. You go away, and I will ask you this. John, there are lots of sports websites now that are moving the Chicago Bears up in their power rankings. I looked at this morning's Pro Football Weekly's power rankings. They've moved them up to 5. I was interested in learning about your power rankings. Where do you have the Bears, and who are your top 5 or so? You've got 55 seconds.
I have the Bears at number 4, but I have them as the number 2 team in the NFC, and I still can't believe I'm saying that. But I have New Orleans at number 1. They haven't looked elite in the last 3 games, scoring only 10 points against the Cowboys and 12 against the Panthers. Granted, they're a much better home team than they are a away team, but they still have Drew Brees and a pretty explosive offense. Only 2 losses. Saints at number 1. Number 2, I have the Chargers. I think they are the best team in the AFC, and they could be a wild card. They have a Hall of Fame quarterback, dangerous weapons at wide receivers, and a stud running back. If I'm the Steelers, the Texans, or the Patriots, I'm doing whatever I can to not host the Chargers on Wild Card Weekend. Then I have the Chiefs at number 3. We know about Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and company. No Kareem Hunt puts a damper on the offense. Still a pretty complete team. Then the Bears, number 4. Best defense in the league. Playmakers out the wazoo on offense. A budding quarterback. They've already beaten the Rams, and honestly, I think they match up well basically against any team in the NFL. Do I love the fact that they might go to New Orleans and have to play the Saints inside? Not so much, but there's no reason to believe why this team can't go in and play with absolutely anybody and beat anybody. Bears at number 4.
Awesome. All right, question number 2. And the Bears do have an outside shot of earning one of the 2 top seeds, which would give them a first-round playoff bye. The scenario that gives the Bears the best shot is if Chicago wins their final 2 games and the Rams lose one of their 2 remaining games. They played the Cardinals at Arizona this week, and then they host the 49ers. How do you put their chances? And can the Bears team win a playoff game if they end up playing on the road in the second round and get past that wild card round? You got 55 seconds.
Well, the Bears could absolutely win the next 2 weeks at San Fran and at Minnesota, but will Week 17 matter? We'll see. San Francisco is no pushover game. We learned that with Oscar, but it also comes down to Nagy assessing the health of his team. Eddie Jackson hurt. Aaron Lynch hurt. Do you leave your guys in the whole time? You've clinched a home playoff game, but we've seen Nagy's approach with player health. He's aggressive play calling on the field, but conservative with player health off the field. I don't know what the actual odds are, but I say the Bears have about a 20% chance right now of getting a first-round bye. Listen, I know we shouldn't look in the rearview mirror, but this is why the Giants game still burns my ass. They win that game and they're in good shape for a bye. I know, don't dwell in the past, but maybe that's my Italian DNA telling me to hold a grudge until it's repaid. As far as going on the road in the playoffs, defense travels, running games travel, coaching travels. They absolutely can win on the road, especially if they have to go to Los Angeles, because half those fans at the Coliseum will probably be wearing navy blue and orange anyway. So yeah, go ahead and send them on the road.
Good stuff. All right, Matt Nagy, he has been named the Coach of the Year by the Associated Press. He's the first Bears coach to win since 2005 when Lovie Smith earned the honor. Mike Ditka won it twice, and George Halas won it twice. How many times do you think Matt Nagy is going to win this award as Chicago Bears head coach? He's got one under his belt. And tell me why. You got 55 seconds.
Well, here's what happens. You win Coach of the Year when you turn a franchise around quickly and take them to the playoffs, and then it's a crapshoot after that. You know how many times Bill Belichick has won Coach of the Year in 19 seasons with the Patriots? 3. You know who won it in 2016? Jason Garrett. Jim Harbaugh won it in 2011 and it got canned 3 years later. Marvin Lewis won it in 2009. You think the Bengals fans are bought any Coach of the Year t-shirts after that game or after that season? So sometimes it's just a matter of who is the flashy coach in that year. Consistency isn't always looked as a good requirement. Quite frankly, I don't care how many times Nagy wins it. If he wins 2 or 3 Super Bowls and only wins Coach of the Year once, I think that'll be just fine as far as Bears fans are concerned. I'm glad he won. It's obviously better than having the absolute schmucks they've had there in the last 5 years, but I'm not going to clamor too much for something like this because, like I said before, it doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. I mean, I don't care about Coaches of the Year. I don't care about all these, auxiliary awards. I want to see wins.
I want to see wins, too, and I totally agree. Heck with awards. Give me Super Bowls.
Yep.
All right, now, Oscar Aparicio did a great job of letting us know who's who over on the 49ers. So now that we know everything we need to know, what are your keys for the Bears to win at San Francisco on Sunday? You got 55, ready, set, and go.
Well, I think the biggest thing is you cannot let up. I can see how it would be easy to not put a full week in after you have a monumental win against the Packers to clinch the division, and you're kind of the toast of the town right now, and then you have to board a plane and go out to the West Coast to play the 49ers in San Francisco, who are 4-10. Maybe you don't have to give it 100% in your mind, but you really do. This is a team that just beat Seattle, one of the hottest teams in the league. Nick Mullins threw for 275 yards, and here's the key. Don't let Nick Mullins throw for 275 yards against the Bears. You got to have the right attitude. I think this game will be a good measuring stick on how the Bears actually handle success, something they haven't have to do for a while. Next would be to jump on them quick. Don't let teams like this hang around. Don't let Robbie Gould kick a field goal to beat the Bears. That's going to sting on so many levels. So I think that you got to get a touchdown or 2 lead, suffocate the offense, have this thing in hand going into the fourth quarter, and then get the hell out of San Francisco with everybody healthy and intact. Every game is important. It's vital that the Bears treat this as such.
Love it. Business trip. Get out of there and win and get home.
Yeah.
All right. Now, last week, John, your pep talk to Mitch Trubisky, it worked wonders. He had a great game. Now it's Anthony Miller I think you need to work on. Matt Nagy mentioned that Miller might be having the mental challenge of playing the longest season of his life. And then Mike Fury, the wide receivers coach, he's been emphasizing proper route running on his plays with Miller. Something, even back in preseason, he was talking about Miller needs to improve his route running and so forth, and that he freelancers. And Fury recently said this. This is a great quote. He said that Miller thinks he's open on running plays. Miller's production and snaps are down over the last 2-3 weeks. He needs you, John. We need you. Pep him up. Get him going. I'm turning off the clock. Go to work.
Oh, Anthony, it's been an interesting rookie season, hasn't it? Rough couple of games for you, but look, this is the season of giving, so I'm going to give it to you straight, buddy. At some point in some game, we're going to need you. We may not need a 10-catch performance, but we might need a crucial first down catch late in the game. We might need a game-winning touchdown in a playoff game. Hell, we might need a big kickoff return if we're trailing late in the game. But now that the team is headed to the playoffs, every single person and every single role is important. You are a big part of this, and with your talent, you can help get this team over the top. Do not be discouraged. Be excited. A lot of rookies don't even get to experience the postseason. And don't put so much pressure on yourself, for God's sakes. This is a team game. Keep putting in the work, and you'll get a big-time present this holiday season. But maybe you won't get it until January, or God willing, you'll get it in February. With that, I'm going to jump into my prediction for this week. I think Nagy will get the guys ready to play, and they won't fall too flat to compete with the Niners. I think the Bears have a big second quarter going into the half and then pull away late in the third. I'm going to say Bears win this one 26-13, and they tack another win in the W column. And remember, this episode of Buffone 55 will be on your podcast stream first thing Thursday morning. Make sure you share it with your friends and give us a review. We are on all of the podcast delivery systems: iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher. I think we're on Palm Pilot. Listen to us on your boom box. You name it. All you have to do is search for Bears Barroom Radio Network, and we will pop up. Bears 100 Proof hit your podcast stream on Friday morning just before the Mike North Advantage. And don't forget Trey Busy's Let's Talk It Out on Thursday here on MixLR. And finally, the Barfly Tailgate Show hit your podcast stream this weekend. Aldo, did I forget anything?
Two things real quick. One, if you're looking to get $50 off any ticket purchase, Bears playoff game, concert, Bulls, Blackhawks, whatever, send an email to marketing@ticksblitz.com. Put down on the subject line Bears Barroom, and Mike Halatak will give you a special promo code. But you got to worry, there's only a limited number of these discounts available. So remember, marketing@ticksblitz, put Bears Barroom in the subject line. And then the second thing I want to tell you is that if you've been injured and need to look for some legal help, head over to Verdoliak.com. They can help you. Or call them. They've got free consultation available over the phone. The easiest way, I won't give you all the contact information. Just go over to BearsBarroom.com. There's a big banner at the top of the website, and then click on that banner. It'll take you straight to their website, Verdoliak Law Group. They've been fighting insurance companies since 1963. John, I want to wish you and all your loved ones a very Merry Christmas. I will talk to you after the holiday.
Hey, Aldo, we already got a big Christmas present with the Bears winning the division and getting a home playoff game. We already got a big present. We just got to watch the rest of the season unwrap itself. Merry Christmas to you and your loved ones. Merry Christmas, Barflies. Bear down on Christmas. We'll see you next time.